clue what climate change was all about. They had just heard about global warming and they said, well, climate change 101, but that's about it. They had no sense and idea on how to sort of deal with the issue. So we set up a climate change commission with IUCN and WWF and others sitting there to capacity build the government as to how to go about it. And by the time I left the High Court, 60% of those short-term policy matters were actually actualized and looked after. Because of that commission, the government understood how to deal with this because the experts were sitting next to them. So in a very participatory kind of a process, we dealt with that. The third ingredient that comes out of our jurisprudence is human dignity. The whole thing rests on human dignity. The entire jurisprudence is anchored in human dignity. At the core of human dignity is the autonomy of the individual will, recognizing man to be a free agent, possessing freedom of choice. Dignity is universal and intrinsic to a human being. Climate change affects all aspects, essential aspects of person's life, raising issues of water security, food security, health security, and energy security. With all these insecurities, a person's ability to design his own life, his plan is weakened, and his ability to make choices becomes difficult. Climate change can diminish individual and collective quality of life, and with it, human dignity. And that's how we look at it. And that's why the court interfered on this fundamental right, which is non-negotiable under our Constitution. One of the strongest fundamental rights that our Constitution has is right to human dignity. We went further. We said we need to now talk about dignity of nature. Let's get rid of this human aspect and let's move on. And we talked about dignity of nature because human dignity is therefore incomplete if it does not factor in dignity of nature. In upholding the dignity of nature, do we actually uphold human dignity? So that's the step forward that we went. We also changed the approach on deciding matters. We went into biocentric approach in attending to issues. We said there has been a recent rise of jurisprudential thought which rejects the false dogma of humans over nature and instead recognize our interconnectedness with natural world and acknowledge its rights to exist, persist, and maintain its vital cycles. The transition from an anthropocentric approach denoted by the right to the environment to a biocentric approach constructed around rights to nature. That's been a paradigm shift in our approach on the judicial side. So we also gave nature a legal personhood. Granting nature a legal personhood is a transformative step in environmental protection, recognizing ecosystems as rights-bearing entities rather than mere property. This legal status allows rivers, forests, and other natural entities to have a standing in court, enabling legal action against environmental harm. The key advantage is that it shifts the focus from human-centered exploitation to ecological preservation, ensuring that environmental interests are directly represented. So countries like Ecuador, New Zealand, and Bangladesh have already implemented this approach, leading to stronger conservation efforts and accountability. We've also introduced, and that's now very close to my heart also, Islamic environmentalism. In one of our recent decisions, we've gone back to the Holy Book, the Quran, and looked at that 90% of it really talks about environmental issues. And that wisdom we brought into the courtroom. And if you see the recent judgment, it talks about, for example, I'll refer to it, the concept of Tawheed, unity of God. The Quranic concept of Tawheed underscores the idea that all things come from one creator. This perspective encourages holistic approach to the environment, viewing the earth and all its inhabitants as interconnected and interdependent. Stewardship, Khalifa. The Holy Quran emphasizes that humans are stewards, Khalifas on the earth. This concept promotes responsible management of the earth resources. And we also thought that we might connect with people. We've been coming up with environmental jurisprudence for years. But now with religion coming into it, so it's culturally so deepened, we could understand that we could relate to people when we were talking about these things. Talk about balance, mizan. The Holy Quran speaks about balance in creation and warns against upsetting this balance, climate change, which is driven by human activities, is disrupting the earth's natural balance. Avoiding waste, says the Quran, israf. Islam discourages wastefulness. The current pattern of consumptions and the waste, especially in more developed countries, are contributing significantly to the greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. And finally, justice, adl. Climate change is also a matter of justice, as it disproportionately affects the poor and vulnerable people who often have contributed least to the problem. So this jurisprudence was brought into it also. The judiciary's role is no longer just about punishment, as it was under environmental justice. Under climate justice, it is about ensuring survival, resilience, and fairness in the face of crisis caused everywhere. As a result, in Pakistan, the courts have held that government accountable for its inaction on climate change, emphasizing the need for comprehensive adaptation measures across various sectors. Courts in Pakistan have shaped adaptive climate jurisprudence, which is globally recognized now, issuing directives to government institutions to take concrete steps toward climate adaptation across various sectors. Our judgments were guided by the urgent need to protect vulnerable communities, ecosystems from the growing impacts of climate change. Now things change here. We've been giving directions for the last maybe 10 years now, thinking that our directions are being actualized and things are changing. But then the floods hit us in 22 and we realized that nothing much has happened on the ground. So this is a wake-up call for the judiciary where we turn course. So however, through the course of implementation, we have come to realize a stark reality, and this is the change that has been brought in. While government or public sector institutions may agree to act, they often lack the financial resources to do it effectively. Nobody from the government would come and say, we can't do it, sir, because you don't have the money. They will say, yes, sir, we'll do it. And we think, oh, we've just today conquered the world. We've passed this decision and everything is going to change on the ground. Now we've realized, no, it's not happening. There's a gap. Nothing is happening on the ground while we keep up with all these judgments and jurisprudence that we keep creating. So this gap between judicial mandates and financial capacity of the government has brought us to the critical realization, and that's where we stand today, a critical realization that climate finance is just not an economic issue. It lies at the very heart of climate justice. So climate justice to us today, that's how judiciary would feel, is climate finance. Without adequate funding, adaptation remains an aspiration.